You don't belong here anymore. Pack your things and get out." Those words shattered Eleanor Hartfield's world in seconds. Her mother-in-law's eyes were cold as winter steel, her finger pointing toward the door like a death sentence. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trying, 8 years of praying for a miracle that never came. And now, standing in the grand foyer of the Hartfield estate with nothing but the clothes on her back, Elena learned the cruelest truth. In some families, a woman's worth is measured only by her ability to produce an heir. But what the Hartfields didn't know was that the quiet cowboy watching from the stables, the man they dismissed as hired help, was about to change everything. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or lawyers. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. Wearing dusty boots and a Stetson hat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The September sun hung low over Whisper Creek, Montana, casting long shadows across the Hartfield ranch. A sprawling 15,000-acre empire that had belonged to the Hartfield family for 4 generations. The main house, a Victorian mansion with white columns and wraparound porches, stood like a monument to old money and older traditions. It was the kind of place where lineage mattered more than love, where bloodlines were discussed over bourbon in leather-bound libraries, where a family tree without branches was considered a dying tree. Elena Hartfield stood in the second-floor bedroom she had shared with her husband Marcus for 8 years, folding clothes with mechanical precision. Her hands moved automatically, placing blouses into a worn suitcase while her mind struggled to process what had just happened downstairs. The bedroom still smelled like Marcus's cologne, still held traces of the life they'd built together. Wedding photos lined the dresser. A pair of his reading glasses sat on the nightstand. Everything looked normal, as if this were just another Tuesday afternoon in late summer, but nothing would ever be normal again. 40 minutes earlier, Elena had been in the kitchen garden, harvesting the last of the season's tomatoes. She'd been planning dinner, something special to celebrate their anniversary next week. The garden had always been her sanctuary, the one place on the vast estate where she felt truly at peace. Her hands had been deep in the rich Montana soil when she'd heard the cars arriving. 3 black SUVs rolling up the gravel drive, bringing Marcus's older brother, his sister, and their mother back from the family meeting in Billings. She should have known something was wrong by the way they walked into the house. Too purposeful, too unified. The Hartfields were many things, but unified wasn't usually one of them. Catherine Hartfield, the family matriarch, had called her into the formal sitting room. Not the kitchen where they usually talked, not the sunroom where they sometimes had tea. The formal sitting room with its oil paintings of stern-faced Hartfield ancestors staring down from the walls, judging everyone who entered. Marcus had been standing by the fireplace, his back turned. That should have been her first real warning. Her husband, who usually greeted her with a kiss and a smile, couldn't even look at her. Catherine had been seated in the high-backed chair that everyone called the throne, though never to her face. At 73, she was still a formidable woman, with silver hair pulled into an elegant twist and eyes that could freeze water in July. She wore her usual uniform of expensive slacks and a cashmere cardigan that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Marcus's brother, Vincent, stood near the windows, arms crossed over his tailored suit. At 42, he was the oldest Hartfield child and had always treated Eleanor with barely concealed contempt. His wife, Priscilla, a blonde woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a country club magazine, sat perched on the settee, one perfectly manicured hand resting on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant with the first Hartfield grandchild of the next generation. Marcus's sister, Diane, sat in the corner, at least having the decency to look uncomfortable. She was the youngest at 36, had always been kind to Elena, but Diane had learned long ago not to contradict her mother. Elena had entered the room with dirt still under her fingernails, wearing her gardening jeans and one of Marcus's old shirts. She'd felt underdressed, unprepared, like she'd been called to the principal's office. Catherine hadn't wasted time with pleasantries. "Sit down, Elena. Not a request. A command." Elena had remained standing. Some instinct told her that sitting would put her at an even greater disadvantage. "We've had a family meeting," Catherine began, her voice carrying the aristocratic clip that came from generations of private schools and finishing classes. About the future of the Hartfield estate and the family legacy. Eleanor's stomach had started to knot. Family meetings that didn't include her were never good news. As you know, the ranch has been in our family since 1892. 4 generations of Hartfields have worked this land, built this legacy. Everything we have, everything we are, exists because our ancestors understood the importance of family, of continuing the bloodline, of passing something down to the next generation." Catherine paused, letting those words sink in like stones dropping into still water. "When Marcus married you 8 years ago, we welcomed you into this family with open arms. We believed you would fulfill your duty as a Hartfield wife. We believed you would give us grandchildren, heirs to carry on the family name." Elena's hands had started to shake. She'd known where this was going, but hearing it spoken aloud was like being slapped. "We've been patient," Vincent interjected from his position by the window. His voice dripped with disdain. 8 years is more than enough time. "But you've failed in your most basic obligation." "Vincent," Diane had whispered, but he'd ignored her. "The doctors have confirmed what we've suspected," Catherine continued, pulling a folder from the side table next to her chair. "Medical records. Elena's medical records. You are incapable of bearing children. Not unlikely. Not difficult, impossible." Elena had felt the room tilt. "Those records were private. How had they gotten access to her private medical files?" "That information is confidential," she'd managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane building inside her chest. "Nothing is confidential when it concerns the future of this family," Catherine replied coldly. "We have resources, we have connections, and we have the right to know if the woman our son married can fulfill her obligations." Marcus had finally turned around. His face was pale, drawn, but he'd said nothing. The man she'd loved for a decade, the man who'd promised to stand by her through everything, stood silent while his family eviscerated her. "This isn't about blame," Catherine had continued, though her tone suggested otherwise. "This is about reality. This is about protecting the Hartfield legacy. Vincent and Priscilla are expecting. That child will be the future of this ranch, this family. There's no room for dead branches on the Hartfield family tree." "Dead branches," Elena had repeated numbly. That's what she'd become. "A dead branch." "We're offering you a generous settlement," Vincent had said, walking over to place a manila envelope on the coffee table between them. "Enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere you can build a new life. A life that doesn't require you to fail at the one thing you were brought here to do." Priscilla had smiled then, a small, satisfied smile that made Elena's blood run cold. This woman, carrying what Eleanor could never give Marcus, looked at her with something close to pity mixed with triumph. "Marcus?" Elena had turned to her husband, desperate for him to say something, anything, to defend her, to tell his family they were wrong. He'd opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Maybe it's for the best, Elena. Maybe we both deserve a chance to be happy, to have the families we want. The families we want. Not the family they'd built together. The families they wanted separately. You want a divorce," Elena had said flatly. "We want what's best for everyone," Catherine corrected. "The papers are in the envelope. Sign them, take the settlement, and move on with dignity. Or fight us and discover exactly how much power and influence the Hartfield family has in this state." Elena had stood there, surrounded by portraits of Hartfield ancestors, faced with 3 siblings who shared Marcus's features and his mother who'd orchestrated this whole thing. She'd felt like she was drowning, like the air in the room had turned to water. "I need to think," she'd whispered. "There's nothing to think about," Catherine had replied, standing from her throne. "You don't belong here anymore, Elena. You never really did. We gave you 8 years to prove yourself, and you failed. Now it's time for you to leave so this family can move forward. Mum, maybe we could give her a few days. Diane had finally spoken up, her voice small. Absolutely not. Every day she remains here is another day of false hope, another day of our son being tied to a woman who cannot give him what he needs. Elena, you have until sunset to pack your personal belongings and vacate this property. Sunset? That's 3 hours. This is my home. This, Catherine had gestured around the room, has never been your home. This is the Hartfield estate. You were a guest who overstayed her welcome. Marcus had finally found more words. Elena, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I've already had your personal account transferred to your name only. You'll have access to those funds, and the settlement is fair, more than fair. Fair. The word had almost made her laugh. What was fair about being thrown out of her home because her body couldn't do what others could? What was fair about 8 years of marriage ending in a formal sitting room with legal documents and medical records used as weapons? I want to talk to you, Eleanor had said to Marcus. Alone. Catherine had started to object, but Marcus had held up his hand. 5 minutes. The others had filed out, Catherine giving Elena one last look that clearly communicated her disgust. When they were alone, Elena had walked to Marcus, searching his face for the man she'd married. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. How can you let them do this? She'd asked. How can you just stand there while your mother throws me out like garbage? You don't understand the pressure I've been under, Marcus had said, running his hands through his hair. Every family gathering, every business meeting, every goddamn Sunday dinner. When are you going to give us grandchildren, Marcus? When are you going to secure the family line? Do you know what it's like to fail at the one thing your family expects from you? Yes, Elena had said quietly. Yes, Marcus, I know exactly what that's like. He'd had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't mean it like that. Then what did you mean? That this is somehow my fault? That I chose to be infertile? No, but Elena, be realistic. My family has expectations. The ranch needs heirs. I need children. I want to be a father. And with you, that's never going to happen. We could adopt. We've talked about adoption. It's not the same. You know it's not the same. Not to my family. So your family matters more than our marriage. More than 8 years together? Marcus had looked away, which was answer enough. Elena had turned and walked out of that room, climbed the stairs to their bedroom, and started packing. That had been 40 minutes ago. Now, as she zipped up her second suitcase, she heard a soft knock on the door. Diane entered without waiting for permission, her eyes red from crying. Elena, I'm so sorry. This isn't right. Mom is just so focused on legacy and bloodlines, and Vincent has always been her favorite, and now with Priscilla pregnant, it's fine, Diane. It's not fine. None of this is fine. Elena placed a framed photo of her and Marcus from their wedding day face down in the suitcase. She couldn't look at their smiling faces right now. Did you know? About the meeting? Diane nodded miserably. Mom told us last week. She'd already talked to the lawyers, already got your medical records somehow. They tried to argue, but you know how she is. Vincent was all for it, of course. He never liked that Marcus married someone who wasn't from an established ranch family. And Marcus, he's been struggling, Elena. He does want children, but I think he's also terrified of standing up to Mom. He always has been. Eleanor closed the suitcase with more force than necessary. Well, that's not my problem anymore, is it? Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere that isn't here. She grabbed the handle of her suitcase and looked around the room one last time. 8 years of her life packed into 2 suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes. That's what she'd been reduced to. As she descended the stairs, she could hear voices from the formal sitting room. Marcus and Catherine discussing something in low tones, probably already planning his next marriage to someone with proven fertility. Elena walked out the front door into the late afternoon sun. Her car, an older Honda that had been hers before the marriage, sat in the circular drive. Someone, probably one of the staff instructed by Catherine, had already loaded her boxes into the trunk. She was putting the suitcases in the back seat when she heard the voice. Leaving in a hurry, Mom. Elena turned to see a man walking up from the stables. She recognized him as one of the ranch hands, though she didn't know his name. The Hartfield estate employed dozens of people, and she'd never been involved in the ranch operations. That was family business, and despite 8 years of marriage, she'd clearly never been family. He was tall, probably in his mid-40s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up. A black Stetson sat low on his head, casting shadows across his angular face. "Not by choice," Elena replied, surprised she was being honest with a stranger. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she'd said. "I heard some yelling from the main house earlier. None of my business, but the walls in that place carry sound better than folks think." Elena felt her cheeks flush. How many people on the ranch knew what had happened? How many had heard Catherine Hartfield declare her worthless? "I should go," she said, moving toward the driver's door. "Where to?" the cowboy asked. "I don't know. Town, I guess. Find a motel. Figure things out." He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes seeming to see more than they should. "Sunset Motel's the only place in Whisper Creek that takes walk-ins. Owner's name is Betty Sanderson. Tell her Cole Westbrook sent you. She'll give you the weekly rate instead of daily." "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. Just Cole." He tipped his hat. "And ma'am, whatever happened in that house, whatever they said to you, you keep your head up. A woman's worth isn't measured by what she can or can't give to people who don't deserve her in the first place." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. A stranger, a ranch hand she'd never properly spoken to, had shown her more kindness in 2 minutes than her husband's family had in 8 years. "I appreciate that," she managed to say. She got in her car, started the engine, and drove down the long gravel driveway. In her rearview mirror, she could see the Hartfield mansion growing smaller. She also saw Cole Westbrook standing in the drive, watching her leave. Something about his expression suggested he knew exactly what the Hartfields were capable of. And he didn't approve. As Eleanor passed through the ornate iron gates that marked the entrance to the estate, she realized she had nowhere to go, no real plan, and a bank account that Marcus claimed was hers, but she hadn't checked. She pulled over at the end of the private road and finally let herself cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. 8 years. Gone in an afternoon. Dismissed like a failed employee. Discarded like a broken tool. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "The lawyer will send the papers tomorrow. Please sign them promptly." This doesn't have to be difficult. Elena stared at that message for a long time. This doesn't have to be difficult. As if her entire life hadn't just been destroyed. As if she was supposed to quietly disappear so the Hartfields could pretend she'd never existed. She wiped her eyes, put the car back in gear, and drove toward Whisper Creek. The town was small, barely 3,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. By tomorrow morning, the whole town would know Eleanor Hartfield had been thrown off the ranch. They'd speculate and gossip and probably feel sorry for her. But Elena Hartfield had been underestimated her whole life. Born to working-class parents in Helena, scholarship to state college, working 3 jobs to get through school. She'd survived poverty, loss, and loneliness long before she'd married into the Hartfield family. She'd survived this too. What she didn't know, as she drove into town with everything she owned in the back seat, was that Cole Westbrook was making a phone call. And that phone call was about to change everything. The Sunset Motel sat on the edge of Whisper Creek, a single-story strip of rooms painted a faded turquoise that had probably been cheerful in 1975. Elena pulled into the gravel parking lot as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if she'd had any capacity. Left to notice beauty, Betty Sanderson turned out to be a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and hair dyed an improbable shade of red. She stood behind the front desk in the tiny office that smelled like coffee and lavender air freshener. "Help you, honey?" Betty asked, looking up from a crossword puzzle. "I need a room. Cole Westbrook said you might have a weekly rate." Betty's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Cole's name, but she simply nodded and pulled out a registration form. "Room 7, end unit, quiet. 300 a week includes Wi-Fi and coffee in the morning. You paying cash or card?" Elena pulled out her wallet and handed over her credit card, holding her breath. If Marcus had frozen her accounts already, she was in serious trouble. The machine beeped approval, and Elena released the breath she'd been holding. "You're all set." Betty handed over an actual key, not a card. "Checkout's at 11, but if you're staying weekly, we're flexible. Ice machines by room 4, and if you need anything, I'm here till midnight most nights." "Thank you." Betty's eyes traveled to Elena's left hand, where her wedding ring still sat, then to her face, really looking at her for the first time. "You okay, honey? You look like you've had a rough day." "Just a rough day," Elena confirmed. Not trusting herself to say more, she found room 7 and spent the next hour unpacking her suitcases in a space that measured maybe 15 by 20 feet. A double bed with a floral comforter that had seen better decades. A small table with 2 chairs. A TV bolted to the dresser. A bathroom with a shower tub combination and towels that were thin but clean. This was her home now. This motel room that cost as much per week as the Hartfields probably spent on a single dinner party. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and finally checked her phone. 17 missed calls. 3 from Diane, apologetic voicemails about how sorry she was. 2 from her own mother back in Helena, who somehow already knew what had happened. The rest were from numbers she didn't recognize. She opened her banking app with shaking hands. The joint account she'd shared with Marcus showed a balance of 0. Completely emptied. But there was a transfer into her personal account, the one she'd had before marriage and barely used. $200,000 with a memo line that read, "Final settlement payment, $200,000. It sounded like a lot until she did the math. 8 years of marriage. That worked out to $25,000 per year. A salary for being a Hartfield wife who'd failed at her one job. She was about to close the app when she noticed something else. A separate transfer from earlier that day, before the settlement payment. $500,000 moved from the joint account to an account under Marcus's name only. He'd taken their savings, their joint money, and given her back less than half. Elena stared at those numbers until they blurred. The Hartfields hadn't just thrown her out. They'd calculated exactly how much she was worth to them and paid accordingly. Her phone rang. Diane again. This time Elena answered. "Elena, thank God. Are you okay?" "Where are you?" "I'm fine. I'm in town. Mom's already called the family lawyer. She wants this done fast and quiet. Vincent's pushing for you to sign a non-disclosure agreement as part of the divorce settlement. A non-disclosure agreement. They don't want you talking to anyone about what happened. Not the media, not other ranch families, no one. Vincent's worried about the family reputation. Priscilla's father owns half the commercial real estate in Billings, and they don't want any scandal before the baby comes." Elena almost laughed. Of course, this wasn't just about her infertility. This was about protecting the Hartfield name, about making sure nobody knew they'd discarded a daughter-in-law like damaged goods. "What if I don't sign?" Diane was quiet for a moment. "Elena, I love you like a sister, but you need to understand what you're up against. My mother has connections everywhere in this state. Judges, lawyers, business owners, politicians. If you fight this, she'll destroy you. She'll make sure you can't work, can't get credit, can't rebuild your life. She's done it before. Dad had a business partner once who tried to sue him over some deal gone bad. Mom made sure that man couldn't get a job anywhere in Montana. He ended up moving to Oregon. Elena, please, just sign the papers and take the money. Start over somewhere new." After they hung up, Elena sat in the growing darkness of her motel room and understood with perfect clarity what was happening. The Hartfields weren't just divorcing her. They were erasing her. The settlement money was hush money. The NDA was to make sure she disappeared quietly. And if she fought back, they had the resources to make her life hell. She thought about Cole Westbrook's words. A woman's worth isn't measured by what she can or can't give to people who don't deserve her. Easy to say. Harder to believe when you were sitting in a motel room with your life in 2 suitcases. The next morning, Eleanor woke to her phone buzzing with a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Hartfield?" This is Gerald Morrison from Morrison and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of the Hartfield family regarding your divorce proceedings. Already. They weren't wasting any time. What do you want, Mr. Morrison? I'm emailing you the divorce documents now. They're quite straightforward. You'll receive the settlement amount we discussed. Plus, you'll be released from any financial obligations related to the Hartfield estate. In exchange, you'll sign a standard non-disclosure agreement and release of all claims. What claims would I have? Morrison's voice took on a patronizing tone, the kind lawyers used when explaining things to people they considered beneath them. Mrs. Hartfield, you lived on the Hartfield estate for 8 years. You had access to family business information, personal family matters, and proprietary ranch operations. The family simply wants to ensure that information remains private. I see. I'll need your signature by the end of business Friday. That gives you 3 days. If we don't have your signature by then, the settlement offer will be reduced by $50,000 per day of delay. That sounds like coercion. That sounds like an incentive for efficiency. Mrs. Hartfield, I'm sure you understand the family wants to move forward quickly. Mr. Hartfield is anxious to begin the next chapter of his life. The next chapter of his life. Like Elena was just a finished book he was ready to shelve. She hung up without responding and opened her laptop to check her email. The divorce documents were there, all 73 pages of them. She started reading, and with each page, her anger grew. The settlement included the $200,000 she'd already received. But it also included clauses that would prevent her from ever discussing the Hartfield family publicly, from writing about them, from even mentioning them by name in any context. If she violated the NDA, she'd owe them $5 million in damages. There were also clauses about the ranch itself. She was prohibited from entering Hartfield property for any reason. She was prohibited from contacting any Hartfield employees. She was even prohibited from attending events where Hartfield family members might be present. They were legally erasing her from their world. Elena was still reading when someone knocked on her motel room door. She opened it to find Cole Westbrook standing there, his Stetson in his hands. "Morning, ma'am. Hope I'm not intruding. Mr. Westbrook, how did you know where I was?" "Betty's my cousin. She mentioned you'd checked in, said you looked like you could use a friend. I took the liberty of bringing breakfast." He held up a paper bag from the diner down the street. Elena should have been annoyed at the intrusion, but she was too tired to be anything but grateful. She let him in, and they sat at the small table while he unpacked coffee and breakfast burritos. "You don't have to do this," Elena said. "I know, but I've worked at the Hartfield Ranch for 12 years, and I've seen how that family treats people. Figured you could use someone on your side. You work for them. Aren't you risking your job by being here?" Cole took a sip of his coffee. "I've got other options. The Hartfields don't own all the ranches in Montana, though Catherine likes to act like they do." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Cole spoke again. "Can I ask you something, ma'am?" "Elena, please just call me Elena." "Elena, then. What are you planning to do? About the divorce, I mean." "I don't know. Sign the papers, I guess. Take the money and disappear like they want. What choice do I have?" Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her with those gray eyes. "You always have choices. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price for making the hard ones." The lawyer said, "If I don't sign by Friday, they'll reduce the settlement by $50,000 a day." Of course they did. The Hartfields always use money as a weapon. But you know what's interesting? They're in a hurry. When powerful people are in a hurry, it usually means they're worried about something. Elena hadn't thought about it that way. What would they be worried about? That's the question, isn't it? Cole finished his coffee. "Look, I'm just a ranch hand. But I've been around long enough to know when something doesn't smell right. Catherine Hartfield throwing you out the same week Vincent's wife is 7 months pregnant. Pushing for a fast divorce with an NDA? That's not just about protecting their reputation. That's about hiding something. Hiding what? That's what you need to find out before you sign anything." He stood up, putting his Stetson back on. "I've got to get back to work before they notice I'm gone." But Elena, if you decide you want to fight back instead of disappear, you let me know. The Hartfields have made a lot of enemies over the years. You might have more allies than you think." After he left, Elena sat with those words. What could the Hartfields be hiding? And more importantly, did she have the courage to find out? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Priscilla Hartfield. I wanted to reach out personally to tell you how sorry I am about everything. I know this must be difficult for you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Elena stared at that message for a long time. Priscilla, the woman whose pregnancy had essentially signed Elena's expulsion papers, was reaching out with sympathy. It felt wrong, calculated. She texted back, "Thank you for the kind words." The response came immediately. "I mean it. I can't imagine what you're going through. Vincent doesn't know I'm texting you. He'd be furious. But woman to woman, I wanted you to know that some of us think you're being treated unfairly." Woman to woman. Elena almost laughed. The woman carrying the air Elena couldn't provide was pretending to be her ally. But then another text came through. "Catherine is planning something. I overheard her on the phone with the family lawyer yesterday. Something about updating the trust documents and ensuring contingencies are addressed. I thought you should know." Eleanor's hands went still. Contingencies, trust documents. What did that mean? She texted back, "What kind of contingencies?" No response came. Elena waited 10 minutes, then 20, but Priscilla didn't text again. That afternoon, Elena did something she'd never done during her 8 years as a Hartfield. She drove to the county records office in Billings, an hour away. If the Hartfields were updating trust documents, there might be public records that could tell her why. The records. Clerk was a bored-looking man in his 50s who barely looked up when she approached his desk. "I need to see property records and trust. Filings for the Hartfield Ranch. Name? Elena Hartfield. I'm family." That got his attention. He looked at her more carefully, recognition dawning. The Hartfield Ranch? That's a complex set of holdings. Going to take some time to pull all the relevant documents. I have time. An hour later, Elena sat in a small research room with a stack of documents that revealed more about her husband's family than 8 years of marriage had. The Hartfield Ranch wasn't just one property. It was a complex web of LLCs, trusts, and holding companies that controlled not just the ranch itself, but mineral rights, water rights, and investments across 3 states. The current trust documents named Marcus, Vincent, and Diane as equal beneficiaries. But there was a clause that Elena had never seen before. If any beneficiary failed to produce an heir within 10 years of marriage, their share would be redistributed to siblings who had produced heirs. 10 years. Marcus had been married to Elena for 8. In 2 years, if they stayed married and childless, Marcus would lose his third of a multi-million-dollar empire. But if he divorced her and remarried someone fertile within that window, he'd keep everything. This wasn't about love or family values. This was about money. The Hartfields were throwing Elena out to protect Marcus's inheritance. Elena photographed every relevant page with her phone, her hands shaking with anger. They'd made her believe she was the failure, the broken one, the woman who couldn't fulfill her duty. But really, she was just an obstacle to their wealth. She was about to leave when the clerk called her back. "Mrs. Hartfield, there's one more thing. A recent filing came through yesterday. Might want to look at it." He handed her a document dated the day before, the same day she'd been thrown out. A deed transfer. The Hartfield family was selling off a 200-acre parcel of the ranch, the piece that bordered the national forest. The buyer was listed as a Delaware LLC, which told Elena nothing useful. "Can I get copies of all of this?" "Sure thing." 25 cents a page. Elena paid for copies of everything and drove back to Whisper Creek with proof that her marriage had been a business transaction all along. She'd been a placeholder, a hope that turned into a liability when her womb proved empty. That evening, she spread all the documents across her motel room bed and really looked at them. The trust structure, the heir requirement, the timing of the divorce, the sudden property sale. Cole was right. The Hartfields were hiding something, and they needed Elena gone before she figured out what it was. Her phone rang. "Marcus," she answered.
"What do you want?"
"Elena, the lawyer said you haven't responded to his email. You need to sign those papers. I've been reading them very thoroughly. There's nothing to read. It's a standard divorce settlement, is it? Because I've also been reading the family trust documents. Interesting clause about heirs and inheritance. Were you ever going to tell me that divorcing me protects your money?" Silence on the other end. "Marcus, did you love me at all? Or was I always just a means to an end?" "That's not fair, Elena. I did love you. I do love you. But this isn't about love anymore. This is about reality. This is about what's best for everyone. What's best for your bank account, you mean? Sign the papers, Elena. Don't make this ugly." "It's already ugly, Marcus. Your family made it ugly the moment they got my private medical records and used them to throw me out of my home. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to think very carefully about whether I want to sign your papers. And while I'm thinking, you can explain to your mother why her plan to quickly erase me isn't working out quite as smoothly as she'd hoped." She hung up before he could respond, her heart pounding. She'd never stood up to Marcus like that. She'd never stood up to any of them. Her phone buzzed immediately with texts. Marcus saying she was being irrational. Catherine's lawyer threatening reduced settlement amounts. Even Vincent sent a message warning her not to make trouble for the family. But the message that made Elena smile came from a number she now recognized as Cole's. "Heard. Through the grapevine, you've been doing some research. Proud of you. Coffee tomorrow morning, same place. Got some things you'll want to know about that property sale." Elena texted back one word. Yes. She didn't know exactly what she was getting into. She didn't know if she could actually fight a family as powerful as the Hartfields. But for the first time since walking out of that mansion, she felt something other than grief and shame. She felt angry, and anger, she was learning, could be a powerful fuel for change. Outside her motel room window, the Montana night stretched vast and dark. Somewhere out there, the Hartfield family was probably gathering in their formal sitting room, discussing the problem of Elena, wondering why she wasn't signing the papers, worrying about what she might do next. Good. Let them worry. Let them wonder. Let them, just for once, feel what it was like to not have complete control. Elena looked at her wedding ring, still on her finger after all this time. She slowly pulled it off and set it on the nightstand. 8 years, reduced to a small circle of gold that had promised forever but delivered betrayal. Tomorrow, she'd meet with Cole and find out what he knew about that property sale. She'd dig deeper into the trust documents. She'd figure out exactly what the Hartfields were so desperate to hide. Tonight, she'd sleep in a motel room that was hers alone, belonging to no one but herself. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and sometimes a start was all you needed. Cole Westbrook arrived at the motel at 7 the next morning, carrying 2 coffees and a folder thick with papers. Elena had been awake since 5, unable to sleep, her mind racing with everything she'd discovered at the county records office. "You look like you've been up all night," Cole said as she opened the door. "Close enough." Elena took the offered coffee gratefully. "You said you knew something about the property sale." Cole settled into one of the chairs at the small table, his expression serious. "I do. But first, I need to know if you're really ready to dig into this. Because once you start pulling on this thread, there's no going back. The Hartfields won't just let you walk away with what you know. They already threw me out with nothing. What else can they do? Plenty." Cole opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "But let's start with what I know. That 200-acre parcel they're selling? It's not random. That land has been in the Hartfield family since the original homestead claim in 1892. Catherine would rather cut off her own arm than sell legacy land. So why sell it now? Because 3 months ago, a geological survey team was out there. Private company, very quiet operation. I only know because I was moving cattle through that section and saw their equipment. When I asked what they were doing, I was told it was a routine environmental assessment. Elena leaned forward. What were they really doing? Looking for lithium deposits. Montana's sitting on one of the largest lithium reserves in North America, and that section of the Hartfield Ranch is in a prime zone. If there's lithium under that land, it's worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions. The coffee cup nearly slipped from Eleanor's hand. Billions? The Delaware LLC buying the land? I did some digging. It's owned by a mining conglomerate based in Nevada. They've been quietly buying up properties across Montana for the past 2 years. The Hartfields are selling before anyone realizes what's under their land. But that doesn't make sense. If the land is worth that much, why sell it for what I'm guessing is regular ranch land prices? Cole's expression darkened. Because Catherine is selling it to herself. Or rather, to a company she controls through about 6 layers of shell corporations. The public sale is at market rate for ranch land, about $4,000 an acre. Total sale price of $800,000. But once the mining rights are secured and the lithium deposits are confirmed, that land becomes worth conservatively $200 million. Eleanor's mind raced. So she's hiding assets from the family trust. That's my guess. See, the trust documents you found at the records office, they govern the ranch and existing holdings. But if Catherine creates new assets outside the trust structure before they're valuable, she can control them independently. Once the lithium mining starts producing revenue, she'll have a personal fortune that doesn't have to be shared with her children according to trust provisions. That's fraud. It's creative estate planning if you're rich and connected. It's fraud if you're anyone else. Cole pulled out another document. But here's where it gets interesting. I have a friend who works for the county assessor's office. He pulled the original geological survey report that the mining company filed. According to their estimates, the lithium deposits extend well beyond that 200-acre parcel. They likely continue through at least another 500 acres of Hartfield land. Elena saw where this was going. So Catherine is selling the first piece to establish ownership and mineral rights, then she'll go after the rest. Exactly. But here's the problem. Under Montana law, mineral rights discoveries on trust property have to be disclosed to all beneficiaries. If Marcus, Vincent, and Diane knew about the lithium, they'd have legal claim to any profits. But if the discovery happens after certain parcels are sold outside the trust, those specific parcels fall outside beneficiary rights. She's stealing from her own children. She's securing her legacy independently of what she views as her children's failures. In Catherine's mind, she built this empire, and she'll decide who deserves what. Vincent will get his share because Priscilla's pregnant. Diane might get something because she's always been loyal. But Marcus? Cole shook his head. Marcus was supposed to produce an heir. He failed. In Catherine's world, failure has consequences. Elena stood and walked to the window, processing this information. So my infertility wasn't just about bloodlines and legacy. It was about money. Marcus loses his trust share without an heir, and Catherine uses that failure to justify cutting him out of the real fortune entirely. That's how I see it. And they need you gone and quiet before you figure any of this out. That NDA isn't just about protecting family reputation. It's about making sure you can't disclose what's really happening with the family assets. Elena turned back to Cole. Why are you telling me this? You work for them. You could lose your job, maybe face legal action for sharing this information. Cole was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes distant. 15 years ago, I owned my own ranch. Small operation, about 500 acres northeast of here. I was married, had a daughter. We were happy making ends meet. Then my wife got sick, cancer. The medical bills destroyed us. I had to sell the ranch to pay for her treatment. He paused, and Elena saw the pain in his expression. She died anyway. 6 months after we sold everything. I was broke, grieving and trying to raise a 12-year-old girl on my own. The Hartfields bought my ranch for about half what it was worth. I was desperate, and they knew it. Catherine Hartfield stood in my kitchen and told me she was doing me a favor by taking that burden off my hands. I'm so sorry. 3 years later, they sold that land to a developer for 4 times what they paid me. Made a fortune while I was working as a hired hand on the property that used to be mine. So yeah, I work for Hartfields. But I owe them nothing. And when I see them doing to someone else what they did to me, using people's pain for profit, I'm not going to stay quiet. Elena felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone. This wasn't just her fight. What do I do with this information? That depends on what you want. You can sign their papers, take their money, and disappear. Let Catherine steal from her own kids and from you. Or you can fight back. But Elena, if you fight, you need to understand what you're up against. The Hartfields have lawyers, money, and connections. They'll come at you with everything they have. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. Marcus again. She answered, putting it on speaker so Cole could hear. Elena, what the hell are you doing? Mom's lawyer says you're asking questions about family trusts and property sales. You need to stop. Why? What am I going to find if I keep looking? You're going to find yourself facing a lawsuit for violating confidentiality provisions. You may not be family anymore, but you signed a confidentiality agreement when we got married. Remember, no disclosure of family business affairs. Elena had forgotten about that. They'd made her sign it as part of the prenuptial agreement, buried in 70 pages of legal documents she'd been too in love to read carefully. So now you're threatening me. I'm warning you. Mom is done being patient. She wants this finished. Sign the divorce papers today, or the settlement offer drops to $150,000. And if you keep digging into family business, she'll pursue legal action for breach of contract. That could cost you everything. Everything? I have nothing, Marcus. You all made sure of that. You have $200,000 in your account right now. That could become zero very quickly. Is whatever crusade you think you're on really worth going broke? Cole leaned forward and wrote something on a napkin, sliding it across the table to Eleanor. She read it and felt her heart skip. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Did you know about the lithium deposits before you agreed to divorce me? The silence on the other end was answer enough. You knew. You knew this whole time that there were mineral deposits worth millions on family land, and you're divorcing me so I don't have any claim to it. That's not... Elena, that's ridiculous. There are no mineral deposits. Who told you that? So, you're saying if I hired an independent geological surveyor to assess the ranch land, they'd find nothing? You can't access the ranch. The property is private, and you're prohibited from entering. Public record geological surveys are available to anyone, Marcus. And they tell a very interesting story. Cole was grinning now, clearly enjoying this. Elena, stop! Whatever you think you've found, you're wrong. And if you pursue this, you're going to regret it. Mom has already talked to Judge Patterson about getting a restraining order if you continue harassing the family. I haven't harassed anyone. I've simply been educating myself about the assets I should have had some knowledge of during our marriage. Assets that were systematically hidden from me while I was used as a placeholder wife until I could be discarded. That's not what happened. Then explain the trust clause about heirs. Explain why I'm being offered money to disappear right when you're about to lose your inheritance. Explain why your mother is selling off ancestral land for the first time in 130 years. Marcus's voice turned cold. You have until 5 p.m. today. Sign the papers or deal with the consequences. He hung up. Elena looked at Cole. Well, I guess I'm fighting. Good. Cole pulled out another document. Then you're going to need this. It's the name and number of a lawyer in Billings, Sarah Chen. She specializes in estate law and has a particular interest in cases involving fraudulent asset transfers. She's also the lawyer who helped me try to get fair value for my ranch 15 years ago. We lost that case, but not because Sarah wasn't good. We lost because the Hartfields had more money and more connections. If she couldn't beat them then, what makes you think she can now? Because then it was my word against theirs. Now you have documents, evidence of systematic planning, and proof of asset manipulation. Sarah's been waiting 15 years for another shot at the Hartfield family. Trust me, she'll take your case. Elena took the paper with Sarah Chen's contact information. Her hand was shaking. There's something else you should know, Cole continued. I wasn't the only person the Hartfields destroyed. There's a pattern. Every 10 years or so, Catherine finds someone to target. A business partner who gets bought out for pennies on the dollar. A neighboring rancher who gets forced to sell because of manufactured debt. A family member who gets cut out of inheritance through legal technicalities. She's been doing this for 40 years. How do you know all this? Because I made it my business to know. After I lost my ranch, I started asking questions. Started talking to other people who'd been burned by the Heartfields. There are at least a dozen people in Montana who have stories like mine. Some have documentation. Some just have memories of how they got screwed. Would they be willing to talk? If they thought it might finally hold Catherine Heartfield accountable? Yeah, I think they would. Elena's phone buzzed with an email. The divorce papers, again with a message from Gerald Morrison. Final offer. $150,000 settlement reduced as promised. Signed by 5 p.m., or the offer drops to $100,000. After that, you'll get nothing but legal bills. She showed the email to Cole. They're panicking, he said. That's good. It means they think you might actually have leverage, or it means they're going to crush me, and they're enjoying the process. Only one way to find out. Cole stood and put his Stetson on. Call Sarah Chen, tell her everything. Let her decide if you have a case. And Elena, whatever happens, at least you'll know you fought back. That's worth something. After Cole left, Eleanor sat with her phone in her hand, staring at Sarah Chen's number. This was the moment of decision. She could call the lawyer and potentially start a war with one of Montana's most powerful families. Or she could sign the papers, take the diminishing settlement, and disappear. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Diane. Please sign the papers. Mom is getting angrier by the hour. I'm scared of what she might do. This isn't worth it. Another text, this time from Vincent. You're making a mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Sign the papers. And then one from a number she didn't recognize. This is Priscilla. I shouldn't be telling you this, but Catherine just called a family meeting for tonight. She's planning something. Be careful. Elena looked at all 3 messages, then at the lawyer's number Cole had given her. She thought about 8 years of being dismissed, diminished, and ultimately discarded. She thought about all the other people the Heartfields had destroyed. She thought about Cole's wife dying while they stole his ranch for profit. She dialed Sarah Chen's number. A woman answered on the second ring. Chen and Associates, Sarah Chen speaking. Miss Chen, my name is Elena Heartfield. Cole Westbrook gave me your number. I need to talk to you about my divorce and some irregularities with the Heartfield Family Trust. There was a pause. Eleanor Heartfield? As in married to Marcus Heartfield of the Heartfield Ranch? Yes, or I was until 3 days ago when his family threw me out. Another pause, longer this time. Cole told you I have history with the Heartfields? He did. And you're calling me anyway, knowing that my last case against them was unsuccessful. I'm calling you because Cole says you've been waiting for another chance. I'm calling because I have evidence of asset manipulation and fraudulent transfers. And I'm calling because I have nothing left to lose. Sarah Chen's voice changed, becoming sharper, more focused. What kind of evidence? Elena spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything. The trust documents. The air clause, the property sale, the lithium deposits, the systematic exclusion of information, the manipulated finances, the coercive settlement offers. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Miss Heartfield, if even half of what you're saying is true and can be documented, this isn't just a divorce case. This is potentially criminal fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud beneficiaries. The implications extend far beyond your marriage. Can you help me? Can you be in my office at 2 p.m. today? Bring every document you have, every email, every text, every piece of evidence you've collected. And Ms. Heartfield, don't sign anything else. Don't respond to any more messages from the Heartfields or their lawyers. From this moment forward, all communication goes through me. I'll be there. After hanging up, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. She spent the next several hours organizing every piece of documentation she had. The trust documents from the county office, screenshots of her banking records showing the manipulated transfers, the emails from the Heartfield lawyer, The threatening texts from Marcus and Vincent. The suspicious outreach from Priscilla. The property sale records. Everything. At 1:15 p.m., she got in her car and drove to Billings. The law offices of Chen and Associates occupied a modest suite in a building downtown. Nothing like the palatial offices the Hartfield family lawyers probably worked in. Sarah Chen turned out to be a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She spent 3 hours going through every document Elena had brought, asking questions, taking notes, and occasionally letting slip a low whistle of appreciation when something particularly damning emerged. "This is extraordinary," Sarah finally said, leaning back in her chair. "The Hartfields have been very, very careless. They're so confident in their power that they've left a trail of evidence that even a first-year law student could follow. So, I have a case. Miss Hartfield, you have several cases. We could pursue divorce with asset disclosure requirements. We could pursue fraud claims related to the concealed lithium deposits. We could pursue beneficiary rights violations on behalf of all 3 Hartfield children. We could potentially even pursue criminal charges for the medical privacy violations." Elena's head was spinning. "What do you recommend?" Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been waiting a very long time for an opportunity like this. "I recommend we go to war, but first we're going to need some allies. You mentioned Cole Westbrook knows other people the Hartfields have harmed. I want to talk to every single one of them. We're going to build a pattern of behavior that shows this isn't isolated. This is how the Hartfield family operates. How long will that take? A few days to gather statements, maybe a week. But here's what we're going to do right now." Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Hi, this is Sarah Chen. I need to file an emergency motion for asset freeze and discovery in the matter of Hartfield vs. Hartfield." "Yes, I'll hold." Eleanor watched as Sarah Chen, this lawyer who barely knew her, prepared to go to battle against one of Montana's most powerful families. "Miss Chen, why are you doing this? Cole said you've been waiting for another shot at them, but this is my fight, not yours." Sarah looked up from her phone call preparation. 15 years ago, the Hartfields destroyed a good man who'd lost everything and was just trying to do right by his daughter. They did it because they could, because no one could stop them. I've spent 15 years building my practice, building my reputation, and waiting for someone to walk through my door with actual leverage against that family. You're not just my client, Ms. Hartfield. You're my chance at justice that's been delayed far too long." The person on the other end of Sarah's call came back. "Yes, I'm ready to file." "The petitioner is Elena Maria Hartfield, and we're seeking an emergency freeze on all asset transfers from the Hartfield Family Trust and associated entities pending full discovery and divorce proceedings. How soon can we get a hearing? Tomorrow morning? Perfect." She hung up and smiled at Elena. "By this time tomorrow, Catherine Hartfield is going to learn that you're not disappearing quietly. And that's when the real fight begins." The emergency hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock the next morning in Judge Patricia Brennan's courtroom. Elena barely slept, running through scenarios in her mind, imagining how the Hartfields would react when they learned what she'd done. She didn't have to wait long to find out. At 6:47 a.m., her phone exploded with calls. Marcus, Vincent, Catherine herself. Gerald Morrison, the family lawyer. Elena ignored them all, following Sarah Chen's instructions to let everything go to voicemail. The voicemails painted a picture of escalating panic. Marcus, at 6:52 a.m. "Elena, what have you done?" "Mom just got served with a court order. Call me immediately." Vincent, at 7:03 a.m. "You stupid, vindictive woman. You have no idea what you've just started. We will bury you." Catherine, at 7:15 a.m., her voice ice-cold. "Miss Hartfield, you've made a grave miscalculation. Withdraw your motion by 9 a.m. or face consequences you cannot imagine." Gerald Morrison, at 7:22 a.m., attempting to sound professional. "Ms. Hartfield, let's discuss this reasonably. There's no need for courtroom drama. I'm sure we can reach an accommodation. Elena listened to each message twice, then forwarded them all to Sarah Chen. Sarah texted back immediately. Perfect. Threats and intimidation. Keep your phone on record mode if any of them approach you in person. See you at the courthouse at 9:30. Elena arrived early, parking across the street from the Cascade County Courthouse. The building was modern, all glass and steel, nothing like the Victorian elegance of the Hartfield mansion. But inside these walls, money and influence mattered less than evidence and law. At least that's what Elena hoped. Sarah Chen met her in the lobby, dressed in a sharp navy suit that meant business. With her was another woman Elena hadn't met before. Elena, this is Jennifer Koslow. She's a forensic accountant who specializes in trust fraud cases. She spent yesterday evening reviewing the documents you provided. Jennifer was younger than Sarah, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that suggested she enjoyed finding patterns in numbers the way other people enjoyed puzzles. "Ms. Hartfield," Jennifer said, shaking her hand, "your documentation is remarkably thorough. I've identified at least 7 separate instances of questionable asset transfers over the past 18 months. The lithium deposit scheme is just the most recent." Before Elena could respond, the courthouse doors opened and the Hartfield family swept in like an approaching storm. Catherine led the procession, dressed in an expensive cream-colored suit, her silver hair perfect, her face a mask of controlled fury. Behind her came Vincent and Marcus, both in tailored business suits. Priscilla waddled along behind them, her pregnant belly making her movement awkward. Diane brought up the rear, looking miserable. Their lawyer, Gerald Morrison, accompanied them along with 2 younger associates carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Elena's car. Catherine's eyes locked onto Elena across the lobby. The look she gave her was pure hatred, the kind of look that said Elena had violated some unspoken rule about knowing one's place in the social order. "Ms. Chen," Catherine said, approaching their group, "I had hoped we could discuss this situation before involving the court." "Mrs. Hartfield," Sarah replied coolly, "my client has nothing to discuss with you outside of proper legal proceedings. Your client is making wild accusations based on misunderstandings and incomplete information. She's clearly emotional about the divorce and not thinking rationally." Elena felt her anger spike, but Sarah touched her arm gently, a warning to stay quiet. "What's irrational," Sarah said, "is selling off ancestral land for a fraction of its actual value while hiding geological survey results from trust beneficiaries. But I suppose we'll let Judge Brennan decide what's rational." Catherine's composure cracked slightly. "Those surveys are preliminary and inconclusive. Nothing has been hidden. Then you won't mind full discovery, including all communications with mining companies and all Shell Corporation financial records." Gerald Morrison stepped forward. "Judge Brennan will dismiss this frivolous motion. Mrs. Hartfield has done nothing wrong." "We'll see," Sarah said pleasantly. "Court's in session in 20 minutes. The Hartfields moved to the other side of the lobby, huddling in urgent, whispered conversation. Elena watched Marcus, the man she'd loved, the man she'd thought she'd spend her life with, and felt nothing but cold determination. At precisely 10 o'clock, the bailiff called them into Judge Brennan's courtroom. The judge was a woman in her early 60s with grey hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie. Lawyers could tell and wasn't impressed by any of them. "We're here on an emergency motion for asset freeze and discovery, filed by the petitioner Eleanor Hartfield, in the matter of her divorce from Marcus Hartfield. Counsel, please approach." Sarah Chen stood and walked to the podium with Jennifer Koslow beside her. Gerald Morrison approached from the other side, flanked by his associates. "Your Honor," Sarah began, "my client has discovered evidence of systematic asset manipulation and fraud within the Hartfield Family Trust. We're requesting an immediate freeze on all asset transfers, pending full discovery to determine the extent of the misconduct." "Your Honor," Morrison interrupted, "this is a transparent attempt by a disgruntled spouse to delay legitimate divorce proceedings." Mrs. Elena Hartfield has been offered a generous settlement, which she has refused to sign. Now she's making baseless accusations to gain leverage. Judge Brennan held up her hand. Mr. Morrison, you'll have your turn. Miss Chen, what specific evidence supports your allegations? Your Honor, may I approach with exhibits? At the judge's nod, Jennifer Coslow brought forward 3 large binders of documentation. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in forensic accounting as Jennifer systematically laid out the evidence. She showed the trust documents with the heir clause that would strip Marcus of his inheritance. She showed the timeline of Elena's medical diagnosis and the divorce proceedings, demonstrating how closely they aligned with Marcus's deadline to produce an heir. She showed the property sale documents and the shell corporation structure that traced back to Catherine Hartfield. Then came the geological survey reports, obtained through public records requests, showing significant lithium deposits on the land being sold. Jennifer had even obtained comparative market analysis showing similar mining properties in Montana selling for exponentially higher prices per acre. Your Honor, Jennifer concluded, the evidence shows a clear pattern. Mrs. Catherine Hartfield discovered valuable mineral deposits on trust property. Rather than disclose this to all beneficiaries as required by Montana trust law, she created shell corporations to purchase the land at agricultural prices, thereby converting trust assets worth potentially hundreds of millions into personal assets worth a fraction of that amount. Judge Brennan was leaning forward now, clearly interested. Mr. Morrison, this is serious. What's your response? Morrison stood and Elena could see he was rattled. Your Honor, the geological surveys are preliminary. No mining operation has been established. No mining permits have been filed. Mrs. Hartfield sold land that she had every right to sell at fair market value. Fair market value for ranch land, Sarah interjected. Not fair market value for mineral-rich property. And Montana law requires disclosure of mineral deposits to trust beneficiaries before any sale affecting those rights. The deposits haven't been confirmed, Morrison argued. Then Mrs. Hartfield won't mind an independent assessment, Sarah countered. And she won't mind explaining why she formed 6 different LLCs in Delaware 3 months before the sale. Judge Brennan turned her attention to the defense table, where Catherine Hartfield sat with perfect posture and an expression of disdain. Mrs. Hartfield, did you have knowledge of potential mineral deposits on the property in question before initiating the sale? Catherine stood slowly, radiating confidence. Your Honor, I've been managing the Hartfield Ranch for 40 years. I conduct regular assessments of our property to make informed business decisions. If there are minerals on our land, we have every right to explore that possibility. That's not what I asked. Did you have knowledge of the deposits before the sale? I had preliminary survey results that suggested the possibility of lithium deposits. Nothing confirmed. And did you disclose these preliminary results to your children, who are beneficiaries of the family trust? Catherine's jaw tightened. The trust gives me discretion over property management decisions. I determined the information was too preliminary to warrant disclosure. Convenient discretion, Sarah muttered. Loud enough for the judge to hear. Judge Brennan ignored the comment, but Elena could see the judge was forming opinions. Mrs. Hartfield, who owns the Delaware LLC purchasing the property? A consortium of investors, and your relationship to this consortium. Morrison jumped in. Your Honor, Mrs. Hartfield's personal investments are not relevant to these proceedings, Mr. Morrison. I decide what's relevant. Mrs. Hartfield, answer the question. Catherine's composure finally cracked. I have a minority stake in one of the investment entities involved in the consortium. The courtroom went silent. Even Morrison looked shocked. Catherine had just admitted under oath to selling trust property to herself, albeit through layers of corporate structure, Your Honor, Sarah said quietly. We have documentation showing Mrs. Hartfield controls, through various entities, approximately 63% of the consortium purchasing the land. This isn't an arm's-length transaction. This is self-dealing with trust assets. Judge Brennan removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. This is exactly the kind of case that gives estate law a bad name. Mr. Morrison, unless you have evidence that completely refutes what I've just heard, I'm inclined to grant the asset freeze. Your Honor, the economic impact would be devastating to the Hartfield Ranch operations. We have employees, contracts, ongoing business obligations. The freeze will be limited to the specific transactions in question and any related asset transfers. Normal business operations can continue, but there will be no further property sales, no trust asset transfers, and no movement of funds from questioned accounts until we have full discovery. Catherine stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is an outrage. My family has been respected in this state for over a century. To have our business dealings questioned based on the accusations of a bitter ex-daughter-in-law is unconscionable. Mrs. Hartfield, sit down, Judge Brennan said sharply. Your family's reputation doesn't place you above the law, and these aren't just accusations. Your own attorney confirmed you have financial interest in the entity purchasing trust property. That alone warrants investigation. She turned back to the lawyers. I'm granting the emergency motion. All assets related to the questioned transactions are frozen effective immediately. I'm ordering full discovery, including all financial records, all communications regarding the property sale, and all geological survey results. I want an independent assessment of the mineral deposits by a court-appointed expert. Discovery deadline is 60 days. Morrison was frantically writing notes. Your Honor, we request an immediate appeal. You can request whatever you want, Mr. Morrison. The freeze stands pending appeal. And Mr. Morrison, I suggest you advise your clients to cooperate fully with discovery. Any hint of document destruction or obstruction will result in sanctions. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Chen, prepare a discovery order and submit it to my clerk by the end of business today. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a status hearing. The court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and Elena felt her knees go weak. They'd won. The first battle, at least. Catherine Hartfield stood frozen, her face white with fury. Vincent was already on his phone, probably calling other lawyers. Marcus stared at Eleanor across the courtroom with an expression of betrayal, as if she'd been the one who'd broken their marriage vows. As the Hartfields filed out, Priscilla hung back, catching Eleanor's eye. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Elena blinked in surprise, but Priscilla was already being pulled along by Vincent. Outside the courtroom, Sarah Chen was practically glowing. That went better than I could have hoped. Catherine admitting under oath that she has a stake in the purchasing consortium? That's the kind of gift lawyers dream about. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we dig. We get every document, every email, every text message related to that property sale. We find out exactly how deep this fraud goes. And Elena, based on what we already know, I think it goes very, very deep. Cole was waiting in the courthouse lobby, his Stetson in his hands. When he saw Elena's face, he smiled. I take it that things went well. The judge froze the assets. Ordered full discovery. Cole's smile widened into a grin. Well, I'll be damned. You actually did it. You took on the Hartfields and won the first round. Just the first round, Elena cautioned. This isn't over. No, Cole agreed. But it's a start. And sometimes that's all you need. As they walked out of the courthouse into the bright Montana morning, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt powerful. Not because she'd destroyed the Hartfields, but because she'd stood up to them. Because she'd refused to disappear quietly. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously. This is Judge Patricia Brennan. Unusual to reach out directly, but I wanted you to know something. 20 years ago, the Hartfields pulled similar schemes with water rights. Several ranchers lost everything. No one had the resources or courage to fight back. Thank you for having both. Discovery should be very interesting. Elena showed the message to Sarah and Cole. The lawyer's eyes went wide. Did a sitting judge just basically tell us she thinks the Hartfields are guilty? She did, Elena said. And more importantly, she told us there's more to find. 20 years or more. Sarah pulled out her phone. I'm calling those ranchers tonight. If there's a pattern going back 2 decades, that changes everything. As they stood on the courthouse steps, Elena looked back at the building where she'd just faced down the family that had tried to erase her. The family that had measured her worth by her womb and found her wanting. They'd underestimated her. They'd assumed she'd take the money and disappear. They'd made a terrible mistake, and Elena was just getting started. Discovery began immediately. Within 48 hours of Judge Brennan's order, subpoenas went out to banks, mining companies, geological survey firms, and every entity connected to the Hartfield Family Trust. Sarah Chen's office transformed into a war room, with boxes of documents stacked along every wall and whiteboards covered in diagrams, mapping the intricate web of Hartfield business. Dealings, Elena found herself in the unexpected position of having purpose again. Every morning she arrived at Sarah's office by 8 and stayed until well past dark, reviewing documents, flagging suspicious transactions, and piecing together the puzzle of Catherine Hartfield's decades-long scheme. Jennifer Coslow had brought in 2 additional forensic accountants to help process the volume of financial records. What they discovered in the first week alone exceeded even Sarah's expectations. "Look at this," Jennifer said on day 5, spreading a series of bank statements across the conference table. In 2003, the Hartfield Trust sold off water rights to adjacent ranch land. The buyer was a Wyoming LLC called High Plains Resources. The purchase price was $1.2 million. "That doesn't sound suspicious on its face," Elena said. "It's not until you trace High Plains Resources. It's owned by another LLC, which is owned by a trust, which ultimately traces back to Catherine Hartfield's brother, who died in 2007. Upon his death, all his assets reverted to Catherine through estate provisions. So she bought trust assets using her brother as a front, then inherited them back completely outside the trust structure." Sarah looked up from the document she was reading. "How much were those water rights actually worth? Based on current market values and subsequent sales of similar rights in the area?" "Approximately $45 million. Catherine paid herself a fraction through a dead man and pocketed the difference." Eleanor felt sick. "How many times has she done this?" "We're finding a pattern every 5 to 7 years going back to 1995, another accountant chimed in. "Mineral rights, water rights, timber rights, even air rights for a telecommunications tower. Always sold to shell companies at agricultural rates, always somehow ending up back under Catherine's personal control. The total theft has to be in the hundreds of millions," Sarah said quietly. "Try 340 million, Jennifer corrected. "And that's just what we've found so far. We're still going through records from the 80s and 90s. That evening, Cole arrived at the office with an older man Elena didn't recognize. He was thin, weathered, probably in his 70s, with hands that showed a lifetime of ranch work. "Elena, this is Tom Brenner. He's one of the ranchers Judge Brennan mentioned." "Tom, tell them what happened in 1999. Tom settled into a chair with the careful movements of someone whose body had been through too much hard living. "My family owned 2,000 acres bordering the Hartfield Ranch on the eastern side. Good land, been in the family since the 1920s. In 1998, we had a drought year. Crops failed, cattle prices dropped. We were hurting but managing." He paused, his jaw working. "Then the Hartfields made us an offer. They'd loan us $200,000 at favorable rates to get through the rough patch. All we had to do was put up the ranch as collateral. We'd been neighbors for 70 years. We trusted them. Elena could already see where this was going. The loan documents were complicated. Lots of legal language I didn't understand. But the lawyer who prepared them worked for the Hartfields, and he assured us everything was standard. We signed. What happened?" Elena asked, though she suspected she knew. Buried in the documents was a clause about water rights. If we defaulted on any payment, the Hartfields didn't just get the ranch. They got permanent water rights to the underground aquifer that ran through our property. That aquifer supplied water to 4 other ranches in the area, including ours. "You defaulted," Sarah said. "We did. But not because we couldn't pay. The loan documents specified payment had to be made in person at the Hartfield Ranch office before 5 p.m. on the 1st of each month. In January 2000, we had a blizzard. Roads were closed for 3 days. I couldn't get to the ranch office to make the payment. Tom's voice cracked slightly. By the time the roads cleared, we were in default. The Hartfields foreclosed immediately. We lost the ranch and the water rights. Within 6 months, they'd sold those water rights to a development company for $8 million. Did you try to fight it? Jennifer asked. Couldn't afford a lawyer good enough to take on the Hartfields. Lost everything trying. My wife died 2 years later. Doctor said it was cancer, but I think it was a broken heart. The room fell silent. There are 6 other ranches with similar stories, Cole said. I've been tracking them down this week. 2 are willing to testify. The others are scared. But if we can show this is part of a larger pattern, they might come forward. Sarah was already making notes. Tom, would you be willing to give a deposition? We could use your testimony to establish a pattern of predatory lending and fraudulent contract terms. If it means stopping Catherine Hartfield from doing this to anyone else, I'll testify in front of God and the whole state of Montana. Over the next 2 weeks, the evidence mounted. Sarah's team uncovered 19 separate transactions over 30 years that followed the same pattern. Exploit someone's vulnerability, use complex legal instruments to obscure the true terms, then seize assets worth far more than the loan amounts. But the lithium deposits remained the crown jewel of the investigation. The court-appointed geological expert completed his assessment and submitted his report. The findings were staggering. Elena sat in Sarah's office as the lawyer read aloud from the report. The lithium deposits on the disputed 200-acre parcel are consistent with a larger deposit estimated to extend across approximately 800 acres of Hartfield Trust property. Conservative estimates place the total value of extractable lithium at $400 million to $650 million based on current market prices. Catherine was going to steal $500 million from her own children, Elena said. She'd already started, Jennifer added, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. Look at this. 3 days before your divorce proceedings began, Catherine transferred $15 million from the trust's operating account into one of her personal LLCs. The transfer was coded as land improvement expenses. But there's no corresponding work orders, no contractor invoices, nothing to show where that money actually went. Sarah leaned back in her chair. She knew the divorce would trigger scrutiny. She was moving money while she still could. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Can we meet? I need to talk to you, please. She showed the message to Sarah, who frowned. Could be a setup. Could be them trying to get information about our case. Or it could be Diane finally growing a spine, Cole suggested. He'd become a regular presence in the office, helping coordinate interviews with former Hartfield employees and neighbors. If you meet her, do it in public, Sarah advised, and record everything. 2 hours later, Eleanor sat in a coffee shop in downtown Billings, her phone in her pocket set to record. Diane arrived looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Thank you for meeting me, Diane said, sliding into the booth across from Eleanor. What do you want, Diane? I want to apologize, and I want to help. Elena studied her former sister-in-law carefully. Help how? Diane pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table between them. Everything on here. Emails, financial documents, recordings of family meetings. 20 years of documentation showing exactly what Mom has been doing. Why now? Why help me after everything that's happened? Diane's hands were shaking. Because I just found out I'm the next target. My husband and I have been trying to have a baby for 3 years. Nothing. Last week, Mom sat me down and told me I have 2 years to produce an heir or I'm out of the trust. Just like you. Just like she planned to do to Marcus if you two didn't have children. Diane, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry. I'm furious. I've spent my whole life trying to please that woman, and it turns out I was always just another asset to be managed or discarded. Diane pushed the flash drive closer. Everything you need is on here. Bank passwords, offshore accounts, communications with mining companies. She kept digital records of everything because she never thought any of us would have the courage to stand up to her. Elena took the flash drive. What's going to happen to you when she finds out you gave me this? I don't care anymore. Vincent is Mom's golden child now that Priscilla's pregnant. Marcus is too weak to fight her. I'm tired of being afraid of my own mother. After Diane left, Elena sat in the coffee shop for another 20 minutes, staring at the flash drive. This small piece of plastic potentially contained evidence that would destroy the Hartfield family as everyone knew it. She drove straight to Sarah's office. The lawyer's eyes went wide when Elena explained what she had. This is unprecedented. If Diane's telling the truth, and this drive contains what she says it does, we're not just looking at civil fraud. We're looking at racketeering, tax evasion, possibly criminal conspiracy. Jennifer plugged the drive into an air-gapped computer, isolated from any network. What they found exceeded their most optimistic expectations. Detailed spreadsheets showing asset transfers dating back to 1987. Email chains between Catherine and various lawyers discussing how to structure transactions to avoid trust disclosure requirements. Recordings of family meetings where Catherine openly discussed manipulating her children's inheritances based on their reproductive success. But the most damning evidence was a document titled Estate Succession Plan Confidential. In it, Catherine had laid out her entire strategy: use the heir requirement to control her children, systematically move valuable assets out of the trust and into personal holdings, and ultimately leave the majority of the real wealth to whichever grandchild she deemed most worthy, bypassing her own children entirely. She never intended for Marcus, Vincent, or Diane to inherit the real fortune, Sarah said, reading through the document. Trust was always a control mechanism. She's been building a shadow empire for decades. What do we do with this? Elena asked. Sarah Chen looked at her with an expression that was part triumph, part concern. We bring down a dynasty. But Elena, once we submit this evidence, there's no going back. The Hartfields will face criminal charges. Your ex-husband could go to prison as an accessory if he knew about any of this. Are you prepared for that? Elena thought about 8 years of being dismissed and diminished. She thought about Tom Brenner losing his ranch and his wife. She thought about all the people the Hartfields had destroyed over 30 years of greed and manipulation. Submit everything, she said. Let the truth come out. Sarah nodded and began drafting the motion to submit the new evidence. By morning, it would be filed with the court, and the Hartfields' carefully constructed empire would begin its collapse. Outside the office windows, the sun was setting over Billings, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Elena watched the sunset and thought about how different her life looked now compared to 2 weeks ago. She'd lost a marriage but gained a purpose. She'd been thrown out of a mansion but found her strength in a motel room. The Hartfields had tried to erase her. Instead, she was about to expose everything they'd hidden. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. The motion to submit Diane's evidence hit the courthouse like a bombshell. Within hours, the story broke across Montana news outlets. By evening, the national media had picked it up. Montana Ranch Dynasty faces fraud allegations, read the headline in the New York Times. CNN ran a segment titled The Billion-Dollar Betrayal, Catherine. Hartfield's carefully cultivated image as a pillar of Montana. Society crumbled overnight. Elena watched the news coverage from Sarah's office, still processing the speed at which everything was unfolding. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from reporters requesting interviews, but Sarah had instructed her to say nothing publicly. Let the evidence speak for itself, the lawyer advised. We don't need to play this in the media. The documents are damning enough. 2 days after filing the new evidence, federal agents arrived at the Hartfield ranch with warrants. Elena watched the footage on the evening news. Black SUVs rolling up the gravel drive she'd walked so many times. Agents in FBI windbreakers carrying boxes of documents out of the mansion. Catherine was filmed being led to a vehicle. Her hands notably not in handcuffs, but her expression one of pure fury. Vincent followed shortly after, arguing with agents who remained unmoved by whatever he was saying. Marcus emerged last, his face pale and drawn, looking more like a frightened child than a 40-year-old man. The charges, when they were announced, were extensive. Catherine faced 17 counts of fraud, 8 counts of tax evasion, 12 counts of breach of fiduciary duty, and 3 counts of racketeering. Vincent was charged as an accomplice on 6 counts. Marcus faced 4 counts for his role in concealing the lithium deposits during the divorce proceedings. The bail hearing was set for the following week. Sarah advised Elena to attend. "They need to see you," Sarah said. "They need to see the woman they tried to erase sitting in that courtroom, watching them face justice." Judge Brennan's courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Tom Brenner and 5 other ranchers who'd been victimized by Hartfield's schemes sat in the front rows. Cole was there, his Stetson in his lap, his expression grim but satisfied. Catherine Hartfield entered in an orange jumpsuit that seemed to diminish her somehow. Without her expensive clothes and perfect hair, she looked smaller, older, more human. But her eyes still held that steel-cold fury when they landed on Elena. The prosecutor was a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Torres from the State Attorney General's office. She stood and addressed the court with military precision. "Your Honor, the state requests remand without bail for Catherine Hartfield. The defendant has substantial financial resources, connections in multiple states, and has demonstrated over 3 decades a willingness to manipulate legal systems for personal gain. She is an extreme flight risk." Catherine's lawyer, a high-powered attorney from Denver named Robert Fitzgerald, stood immediately. "Your Honor, Mrs. Hartfield is a 73-year-old woman with deep ties to this community. She has no criminal record and no history of violence. The state's characterization is inflammatory and inappropriate." Judge Brennan looked at the thick file of evidence on her bench. "Mr. Fitzgerald, your client is accused of systematically defrauding multiple parties over 30 years to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Her ties to the community are precisely what enabled these alleged crimes. The state's request is granted. The defendant is remanded without bail." Catherine's composure finally shattered completely. "This is outrageous. I built that ranch. Everything I did was to protect my family's legacy. Mrs. Hartfield, you will have ample opportunity to present your defense at trial," Judge Brennan said firmly. "But you will do so from custody." Vincent's bail was set at $5 million, which his wife Priscilla posted within hours. Marcus's bail was $2 million. He didn't have access to family funds anymore, and Elena wondered if anyone would help him. She got her answer that evening when Diane called. "I paid Marcus's bail," Diane said quietly. "He's still my brother, even if he's an idiot who went along with Mom's schemes." "How are you holding up?" Elena asked, terrified, relieved, angry, all at once. "The FBI interviewed me for 6 hours yesterday. They want me to testify against Mom and Vincent. Will you?" "Yes, it's time this family faced the truth about what we've become, or what Mom turned us into." The trial was set for 3 months later, but the civil cases moved faster. Sarah filed an emergency petition to dissolve the Hartfield Family Trust and place all assets under court supervision pending resolution of the fraud. Claims the hearing for that motion brought Elena face-to-face with Marcus for the first time since the arrests. They found themselves in the courthouse hallway during a recess, 30 feet of marble floor between them. Marcus approached slowly, his hands in his pockets. "Elena, can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea, please." 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, Elena followed him to a quiet alcove away from the crowds. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. His eyes were hollow. "I need you to know I didn't fully understand what Mom was doing," he began. "The lithium deposits, yes, I knew about those. But the rest of it, the 30 years of schemes, I swear I didn't know. Does it matter?" Elena asked. "You knew enough. You knew about the deposits, and you divorced me anyway to protect your inheritance. You chose money over our marriage. I chose my family. I chose loyalty to the people who raised me. You chose wrong." Elena's voice was steady, calm. "And now you're facing federal charges because of it." Marcus looked down at his shoes. My lawyer says if I cooperate, if I testify against Mom and Vincent, I might avoid prison time. But I'd have to tell them everything. Every conversation, every meeting where the family business was discussed. Then tell them everything. For once in your life, Marcus, do the right thing. It would destroy what's left of our family. Your mother already did that. You're just finally seeing it. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting the truth of her words. I'm sorry, Elena, for all of it. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. Yes, I did. But I'm not interested in your apology. I'm interested in justice for everyone whose family hurt. He walked away without another word. The trust dissolution hearing took place a week later. Jennifer Koslow presented a detailed analysis showing that the legitimate trust assets, after removing all the fraudulently transferred properties, amounted to approximately $78 million. The properties and rights that Catherine had stolen over the years totaled $340 million. Judge Barren ordered the entire estate placed in receivership. A court-appointed administrator would manage operations while the criminal cases proceeded and the civil claims were sorted out. What happens to the ranch? Elena asked Sarah after the hearing. Depends. If the criminal charges stick and the fraud is proven, the ranch might have to be sold to pay restitution to victims. Tom Brenner and the other ranchers would have first claim. Then you, as a defrauded beneficiary through your marriage. The Hartfield children might end up with a fraction of what they thought they'd inherit. Good, Elena said, surprised by her own lack of sympathy. Maybe they'll learn what it's like to build something from nothing. 6 weeks later, the first criminal trial began. Catherine Hartfield v. the state of Montana. The courtroom was packed every day with spectators eager to watch the fall of a dynasty. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented the evidence methodically. The shell corporations, the predatory loans, the manipulated trust documents, the concealed mineral surveys. Witness after witness testified about losing ranches, water rights, timber rights. Tom Brenner took the stand and described watching his wife die of heartbreak after losing everything. Catherine's defense was that everything she'd done was legal estate planning, that she had discretion under the trust terms to manage assets as she saw fit, and that any appearance of impropriety was simply aggressive business practice. The jury didn't buy it. After 4 weeks of testimony and 3 days of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on 14 of 17 fraud counts, all 8 tax evasion counts, 9 of 12 fiduciary duty breaches, and 2 of 3 racketeering charges. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Elena attended, sitting in the front row between Cole and Tom Brenner. Sarah sat at the prosecutor's table as a witness for victim impact statements. Judge Brennan asked if any victims wished to address the court before sentencing. Tom Brenner stood first. His voice shook, but his words were clear. Catherine Hartfield didn't just steal my ranch. She stole my wife's will to live. She stole my children's inheritance. She stole 30 years of peace from my life. I hope she spends whatever years she has left understanding what it feels like to lose everything. 4 other ranchers spoke, each telling similar stories of loss and betrayal. Then Sarah called Elena to the stand. Elena walked to the witness box with her head high. She looked directly at Catherine Hartfield, who stared back with undisguised hatred. Mrs. Hartfield, Judge Brennan prompted, would you like to address the court? Your Honor, Catherine Hartfield measured my worth by my ability to produce children. When I couldn't, she threw me out like garbage. But her cruelty gave me something unexpected. It gave me the motivation to look closely at her empire. And when I looked, I found 30 years of theft, manipulation, and destroyed lives. Elena's voice grew stronger. She didn't just hurt me. She hurt her own children, treating them like assets to be managed rather than people to be loved. She destroyed families, stole property, and corrupted everything she touched. I hope her sentence reflects not just the financial damage she caused, but the human damage that can never be calculated. Catherine finally spoke, her voice dripping with venom. You were always weak. That's why my son never truly loved you. Perhaps, Elena said calmly. But I'm strong enough to be standing here while you're sitting in that chair facing 20 years in prison. I think history will remember which of us was truly weak." Judge Brennan gavelled for order as murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Mrs. Catherine Hartfield," the judge began, "you have been found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, tax evasion, breach of fiduciary duty and racketeering. The evidence presented shows a systematic pattern of predatory behavior spanning 3 decades. You used your position of trust and your family's reputation to exploit vulnerable people for personal gain." The judge paused, looking directly at Catherine. "You showed no remorse during this trial. You blamed your victims, you minimized your actions, and you demonstrated that even now you believe the rules don't apply to you. Therefore, I am sentencing you to the maximum penalty allowed by law, 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $340 million in restitution to your victims." Catherine's face went white. 25 years. At 73, it was effectively a life sentence. Vincent received 12 years. Marcus, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received 5 years of probation and community service, but no prison time. As the courtroom cleared, Elena stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the cold Montana air. Cole stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," Elena said simply. "For the first time in 8 years, I feel completely free." 18 months after Catherine Hartfield's sentencing, Elena stood in what had once been the formal sitting room of the Hartfield mansion. The room where she'd been told she was worthless now served as the conference center for the Whisper Creek Community Land Trust. The oil paintings of stern-faced Hartfield ancestors had been replaced with photographs of the families who'd reclaimed their stolen land. Tom Brenner's photograph hung prominently near the window. He'd passed away 3 months earlier at age 81, dying peacefully on the 2,000 acres Catherine had stolen from him 30 years prior. His daughter Amy had scattered his ashes across the property, fulfilling his final wish to become part of the land he'd fought so hard to reclaim. Elena ran the trust now, overseeing the redistribution of recovered assets and managing the lithium mining project that had finally broken ground. The mining company had agreed to environmentally responsible extraction methods, with 70% of all profits flowing directly into community development funds. Conservative estimates projected $500 million in community revenue over the next 20 years. The door opened and Cole Westbrook entered, carrying project reports. Over the past year and a half, he'd become the trust's operations manager, coordinating between the various families who'd received land restitution and ensuring sustainable management practices across all properties. "The medical clinic breaks ground next month," Cole said, spreading blueprints across the conference table. "School expansion starts in the spring, and the housing development for young families got final approval from the county." Elena reviewed the plans, still amazed at how completely the landscape had transformed. Where Catherine had hoarded wealth, the community now invested in shared prosperity. The Tom Brenner Memorial Clinic would provide health care to 3 rural counties. The expanded school would offer programs Catherine's greed had made impossible for decades. "How's the grant program doing?" Cole asked. "We've approved funding for 15 new farming operations this quarter. Young families who could never afford land now have real opportunities." Catherine built her empire denying people. Sarah Chen arrived for their monthly legal review meeting, bringing news about the criminal appeals. Catherine filed her 4th appeal last week. Denied again. Vincent's 2nd appeal was also rejected. They'll both serve their full sentences. "Any word on Marcus?" Elena asked, more from curiosity than concern. "He completed probation last month. He's working ranch management in Great Falls, living quietly. Diane says he's actually happy for the first time she can remember. Turns out losing everything freed him from trying to be who Catherine demanded. Diane herself had transformed remarkably. She donated her remaining inheritance to the trust, taken a teaching position at Whisper Creek Elementary, and was slowly rebuilding relationships with people her family had harmed. She'd never marry or have children, having discovered that freedom from Catherine's heir obsession brought her more peace than any pregnancy could have. That afternoon, Elena met with Rachel Martinez, the young woman who'd arrived at the Sunset Motel 18 months earlier, fleeing an abusive marriage. Rachel now worked full-time at the Trust and was enrolled in online college courses, working toward a degree in social work. Her daughter attended the daycare center the Trust had established for employee families. "I wanted to show you something," Rachel said, pulling out her laptop. "I've been designing a program to help other women in situations like I was in. Legal resources, housing assistance, job training. Everything I wish I'd had access to when I was trying to leave." Elena reviewed the proposal, impressed by its thoroughness. "This is exactly what the community needs. Let's present it to the board next month. You don't think it's too ambitious?" "Rachel, 18 months ago you arrived here with nothing. Now you're designing programs to help others escape domestic violence. If that's not proof that ambitious goals are achievable, I don't know what is." The following week brought the preliminary hearing for a class action lawsuit that had emerged from the Hartfield case. 17 additional families had come forward with evidence of exploitation by Catherine over the years. Some cases dated back to the 1980s. Sarah Chen was coordinating the legal team, and early settlement discussions suggested the families would recover significant compensation. "The pattern is undeniable now," Sarah explained during a strategy session. Catherine Hartfield spent 40 years systematically identifying vulnerable people and exploiting their circumstances for financial gain. Your case broke it open, but you were just the most recent victim in a very long line. Elena thought about that often. How many lives would have been saved if someone had fought back sooner? But she also understood why no one had. The Hartfields wielded enormous power. Fighting them seemed impossible until someone finally proved it wasn't. The documentary, The Barren Truth, premiered at a film festival in Denver. Jordan Reeves had crafted a powerful narrative that intercut Eleanor's story with those of other Hartfield victims, revealing the systematic nature of the exploitation. The film won the Audience Award and secured distribution deals that would bring the story to national audiences. When reporters asked Elena how it felt to be vindicated, she had a ready answer. This was never about vindication. It was about accountability. Powerful people need to understand that laws apply to them too, and that victims aren't powerless just because someone tells them they are. Catherine Hartfield released a statement through her attorney claiming the documentary was defamatory. Her lawyer filed a lawsuit seeking to block distribution. The lawsuit was dismissed within 2 weeks, with the judge noting that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. On a cold November afternoon, Elena drove out to the property where Tom Brenner's ranch had been restored. Amy Brenner was there with her 2 teenage children, teaching them to mend fences the way her father had taught her decades earlier. "Dad used to say the land remembers," Amy told Elena as they walked the property line. "He meant that the land holds the history of everyone who worked it, loved it, lost it. He died knowing his grandchildren would inherit that history. You gave him that gift. I just asked questions your father was too exhausted to ask any more. You did more than ask questions. You fought when fighting seemed hopeless. That's not something everyone can do." As winter settled over Montana, Elena found herself reflecting on how completely her life had transformed. 2 years earlier, she'd been Elena Hartfield, barren wife, worthless woman, someone measured solely by her reproductive capacity. Now she was Elena Brennan again, her maiden name reclaimed, and her worth measured by actions rather than biology. Cole had become a constant presence in her life, though they'd taken things slowly. Both had been burned by rushed decisions and family pressure. Their relationship grew naturally from shared work and mutual respect, built on partnership rather than expectations. One evening, sitting on the porch of Cole's rebuilt ranch house, He asked the question that had been building between them for months. "Elena, I know we've been taking it slow, but I need you to know something. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to share my life with you. Not because I need you to give me children or run my household or fit some predetermined role. Just because you're you, and I love who you are." Elena looked at this man who'd stood by her through everything, who'd risked his job to help her fight back, who'd never once measured her worth by anything other than her character. "Cole Westbrook, are you proposing?" "I'm proposing the possibility. Whatever shape that takes, whatever timeline works for you. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people choosing each other freely." "Then yes," Elena said. "To all of it. To possibility and partnership and building something together that's ours alone." They married in the spring in a small ceremony at the Community Trust Building. Diane attended, along with Sarah Chen, Betty Sanderson, Rachel Martinez, Amy Brenner, and dozens of others whose lives had been touched by Elena's courage to fight back. Marcus sent a card with a simple message: "I'm happy you found the life you deserved. Thank you for teaching me what integrity looks like." Catherine Hartfield would spend the next 23 years in federal prison, dying at age 96, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. Vincent would be released after serving 10 years, moving to Oregon, where no one knew the Hartfield name. Neither would ever acknowledge the harm they'd caused, but their inability to accept responsibility no longer mattered. The community they'd exploited had rebuilt itself stronger and more equitable than before. The land they'd hoarded now supported families. The wealth they'd hidden now funded schools and clinics and opportunities. 3 years after that morning, when Catherine had thrown her out, Elena stood at a podium in the Tom Brenner Memorial Clinic, speaking at its grand opening. "I was once told I belonged in a cage because I couldn't have children," she said to the assembled crowd. The woman who said that believed a person's worth was measured by their reproductive capacity, their family name, their ability to serve someone else's legacy. She was wrong about all of it. Elena looked out at the faces before her, families who'd reclaimed stolen land, young farmers starting operations, children who'd have opportunities Catherine's greed had denied previous generations. Real legacy isn't about bloodlines or family names carved in stone. It's about what we build together, how we treat each other, whether we choose justice or convenience when the moment comes. Everyone here created this legacy. We chose the hard path over the easy money. We chose truth over comfortable silence. And because we made those choices, dozens of families have their land back. And this community has resources that will benefit generations to come. After the ceremony, Cole found her standing alone, looking out at the Montana landscape she'd come to love. "You did good," he said simply. "We did good," Elena corrected. "All of us together." She thought about the cowboy who'd stood in the Hartfield driveway that terrible morning and told her that her worth wasn't measured by what she could give to people who didn't deserve her. He'd been right then, and the years since had proven it over and over. Elena Brennan had been thrown out for being barren, but she'd created something more valuable than any biological legacy, a community built on justice, a model for accountability, and proof that power without character always eventually falls. The Hartfield dynasty was gone, destroyed by its own corruption. In its place stood something better, something built by people choosing integrity over inheritance. And that, Elena thought as she took her husband's hand, was the only legacy that truly mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.